Good morning, Harris County. It is 10 a.m. It is the first Thursday of the month. It is time for the Homegrown Lecture Series, brought to you by the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension A&R unit. I'm Paul Winsky. I will be moderating today, but today our speaker is Brandi Keller, and she will be covering tomatoes for the patio. As you can see on the screen on the right-hand side is the agenda for the lectures. We'll be back next month, April. I will be talking about starting plants from cuttings. Remember, all of these recordings are available on our YouTube site or our YouTube channel, Harris County Extension Horticulture. So you can either use the QR code and that will take you there, or here's the website address, or you just Google YouTube Harris County Extension Horticulture, and you will find the library of all the recordings that we have been doing over the past almost 2 years. Let's see. The other thing I want to mention to everybody. I'm sorry, that's YouTube. Don't forget about our podcast. It's been a lot of fun for us. It's been going really well. It doesn't matter what platform you use, Apple Podcast or Spotify, we are available. You can find us there. And we just had our 10th episode. Shannon spoke with Kay Wolf, who is a part of the USDA FCS service. She is the executive director. So if you are interested in funding for your business or what the USDA has to offer, please give us a listen. And last but not least, before we get started, is new for 2022. The Homegrown Roadshow is coming to you. Yes, we are going to do a half-day live event in about a month, just over a month, Saturday, April 9th. We will be at the Trini Mendenhall Community Center. So please join us. Brandi's going to be speaking about successful herb combination containers. I am going to talk about the results of our trials. The master gardeners have been doing an excellent job over the past 2 years, 3 years. We've got a lot of things that we can share with you. So and it's not just flowers, it's also vegetables. We've been doing some vegetable trials. And Shannon will be talking about gardening 101. So what you need to do to get started, and then we'll go into some specifics with regard to herbs and results from our trials. So we are really excited about that. We hope you will join us. We are going to have door prizes, giveaways. So it will be, and you'll get to see our mugs if you really want to, as opposed to us just talking behind, coming to you virtually. So you will actually get to see us. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to kick it over to Brandi and Shannon, because they are in the studio over in the other room, and they will get things going. So we should be seeing them here shortly. Hopefully they have unmuted their microphone. They sent it live. There they are. I see them. Go ahead. Unmute.
All right. All right. Well, welcome. I'm not sure all the introduction that Paul gave, but I am Brandi Keller with Texas AgriLife Extension, here back for another homegrown lecture series. Essentially in a container. I mean, around Houston, there are plenty of yards, but I mean, more often than not, with or just small debt. You don't always have to grow them. So the first thing we're going to is demonstration. We're going to talk about supplies, and we'll go into covering the the different cultivars. So on the right, I don't know if you could see it. These are items. Medium, fertilizer, support, transplants, and then you can really use anything as long as it has good drainage. By far, the most important thing is a pot to have drainage. If it does not and it's plastic, you can drill holes in the bottom, but you just want to be sure that that water has somewhere to go. I have a few different materials right here to go over. So the first one is, you know, that traditional look, the terracotta. I just love the way these look, but you might know that they dry out very, very quickly. The one thing it does, though, is it does hold the soil pretty well. As far as plastic, and we might take a little bit closer look at some of these plastic pots. This one comes with a little saucer. I think it's all personal preference. I do not like these because it essentially still just allows that soil to sit in water. So personally, I just rip these off. This was much harder to do earlier, so you might need a little bit of manpower or hand. You know what I'm talking about. And then I would put it in a bigger saucer so you can actually see the amount of water. There is a bigger pot. This pot here, I have already detached that one, and you could see the little bit of water in it. And that wasn't even from being watered. That was just from some wet soil. So I take those off. I do not use those just because I do not like that you cannot see what kind of water they are sitting in. Plastic, though, it's going to keep your soil pretty moist. Darker colors, you know, like this black one, that is going to absorb quite a bit of money on any types of pots. But really, if your goal is just to, you know, plant some tomatoes and have tomatoes to eat, and you don't want to spend a whole lot of money. I mean, I bought this one for $5, or no, it was $3 at one of the nurseries. So this is another option is just like this big pail. Actually, what we do are container gardening plants in. You saw the bottom on your garden. Okay. Trying to deal with the micro. Larger holes in the bottom so it would drain pretty easily. Can you plant, you know, a tomato in a really small pot? Well, possibly, but you know, some of the cultivars we're going to look at you're going to be able to do that a little bit better. Ultimately, the more soil that you provide for that tomato, the better, and the better those roots are going to grow, the more roots will grow and the healthier they will. So if you don't have to skimp on pot size, then I think probably maybe 10 to 15 gallon would be great. These 5 gallons definitely will do with certain varieties. These ones are definitely, this one's pretty small. I wouldn't plant a tomato in that. But this is going into the potting media that I'm going to talk about. Potting media you can buy at some of the big box stores at the nurseries. It is essentially soilless. And when you get it, it is disease-free. Now, if you do not use that bag all the time and you have it left over from last year, then when you look inside of it, it could have possibly grown mold in it. So we would not call that disease-free. So that is why you do not want to leave those bags hanging around. But when you open that potting media, you can see how dry it is. So I personally would never just plant any vegetables or tomato directly in that and then water it. You always want to, we can start with this one. You always want to pre-moisten it. So in a big pot, I might do it in stages of 2 or 3 sections. So start out with it, water it, and then add more soil. So this is way too dry. And then if you are able to make a ball out of it, and it drips water. That is way too much. But as you see here, this kind of retains that ball. So I think this is a really good. That's really well watered right there. So that's how you would want to start that out. Let's see. Going into, now this is store-bought potting media. You can make your own with some soil, perlite, peat moss, or peat moss alternative. That's just up to you. Going next into fertilizer, I do not have it with me, but when you plant your transplant, you can plant it with some slow release fertilizer. If you buy a new potting, a bag of potting mix, that fertilizer that's in there, if it says it comes with fertilizer, generally has a life of about 2 weeks. So you want to add the some slow release fertilizer with that. But then beyond that, the very next week, it would be better, even better, if you added a soluble fertilizer. And that can be a synthetic. If it's synthetic, depending on the size of your pot, you always want to read the labels for how much you should be using. But with synthetic, it's about 1 to 2 tablespoons. If you use an organic fertilizer, that's about a 1/4 cup. The other thing is support. So we're going to talk about some of these tomatoes and how they don't need support like some of the taller ones, but it's still very helpful, especially because some of these have a really high fruit to leaf ratio, and it can, maybe knock them over with a strong wind, or even just some of that fruit can bear down. So you want to add that when you transplant. And then getting to the transplants, we have some examples here. And I went out and bought these from a few nurseries. Let's see. So these are the Tumbling Tom. They are yellow and red. We're going to talk about these later, but you can see there's a little bit of damage here. We've had those cold nights, even though the nursery was protecting them. They still got a little bit, but you can see there's a lot of healthy growth right here. If we look at the roots, just to give you an idea of what to look for when you are when you're shopping, you could see that those roots haven't really, they look really great. They haven't really come to the sides very much. So that's really great. That's a good sign. Even this one over here, this is the Bush Early Girl. Really great sign of roots. Look how white they are. Beautiful. You want to look for sturdy stems. Now, not all tomatoes are created equal. Tumbling Tom is a much smaller plant. The Bush Early Girl does have a really strong, sturdy stem. But look around and not, understanding that different varieties can offer different qualities. You want to make sure that you are purchasing a good, healthy plant. These are the same plant, for example. It doesn't mean this one started earlier, but I still think this one has come off to a really great start, though. That's a good stem on there. We are mostly going to be talking about determinate tomatoes, but I'm going to show you some examples of indeterminate, and we'll go over this in a second. Okay. Oh, do we have a question? Oh, go ahead. I would say, so it depends what type of, repeat the question. Can I plant, so someone asked, can I plant more than 1 tomato in a pot? It's really going to depend on the variety, actually. If you have a Bush Early Girl and you have a 15 to 20 gallon pot, this is going to be the one plant for it. So, how big of a pot do you want, and how much soil do you want to put into it? Now, if you have some of these dwarf varieties, this one is a Tumbling Tom over here. this came from the nursery. They're going to overplant to make it, they're going to order it to make it look nice and full. But I noticed that this basket has about 4 or 5 plants in it. I think that is a bit much, even for Tumbling Tom. In general, if you have a 5-gallon pot like this, it's going to be 1 plant. You could possibly go more than 1 plant for some of the smaller varieties. We'll go over those in a little bit. But then when you do, you kind of lose what you have that small plant for because they can, sit on the tabletop, they grow shorter. So, if you have a pot that's much bigger than a 20-gallon, then yes, definitely. So, okay, here's the deal. You get the new potting. Oh, I always forget. So the question was how often to fertilize, and it's pretty simple to remember. If you have that new potting soil, you mix slow release balanced fertilizer in with it. So like a 10-10-10, 20-20-20. You mix that in with the soil. 1 week later, use a soluble fertilizer, similar, balanced. And then you repeat that 1 week later. So you're only going to have 3 fertilizer applications. One is going to be that slow release with the potting soil. Then you're going to do the soluble fertilizer 1 week apart. And really, these are determinate varieties, and that'll get you through mostly 2 to 3 months. So unless there's probably, severe raining, severe weather, and that's being leached out, you don't even actually need any more than that, typically. I just want to show these. Here's the deal. These are not real world. These are going out, and I bought these, and that's assuming I'm going to plant them right away. What do we do though? We go out and we buy plants, and we do not plant them right away. Okay, so I wanted to show you these. This is an indeterminate tomato. We're going to go over some of that when I switch over to the presentation, but these are going to grow a lot taller. But you can see I've held on to this for a while, and look at the difference in those roots. I mean, you can see the nice white, healthy ones of the bush early girl, and how this is really kind of not looking that great. It also dries out very quickly, so this needs to get pretty soon. And then here is another one. This is a black cherry, indeterminate. It's starting to lean over. Now, if we were planting this in the ground, you can actually plant it on its side, kind of like in a ditch, and have the soil come up to, maybe right about here, and have this much of the plant come up. The cool thing about tomatoes is that they can actually grow roots from these nodes, so you can do that. All these points are going to be roots underground, making it a stronger, sturdier tomato. Now, if you have a smaller tomato, so we're going to plant one of these up. If I say I'm going to plant one of these up, do you all hear giveaway? So if I put this in here, I already started with some moistened soil. I just break up. I don't want to really destroy those roots. They're not circling too much. And I can plant it. Now I don't have pruners right here, but I would take these, kind of pinch those off, and you can plant this tomato so you can plant it deeper, so you're just going to provide extra roots. The other thing too is if you have the choice to choose between a plant with flowers and without flowers, yes, it is better just because to choose the choice without flowers, because it's going to be able to focus all that energy on the roots. But like this big tomato over here, I think it's already started. I can't see. Oh, this one. Oh yeah, this one has some fruit on it. So I wouldn't I wouldn't have the heart to take that off. So you see what we started off with was a taller plant, and now it's shorter in the ground, and all those are going to be, well, that's going to produce more roots. Now with these are so short, you're not going to be able to do that much. But you know, I would go a little bit. All these points where leaves are coming off. Now, some of you in the Houston area, you might know exactly what I'm talking about, because last year we had so much rain that people were saying something's growing off my tomato stems, and those were actually the aerial roots. The ground got so saturated with water that there was no available oxygen. So they had to grow roots up from the sides to get that oxygen in. Now, full sun, we're going to talk about that too. It's going to, these need full sun, at least 6 hours. 8 to 10 would be better. If they get less, they'll just get a little bit leggier and, you know, just stretched out a little bit. Here's one of the resources. We will provide vegetable gardens in containers from AgriLife Extension. Here's another one we'll be talking about in a minute. This is if you're in Harris County, we have a vegetable variety list, and these are the tomatoes that we have tried here in Harris County. Now, it's been a few years, so you know there could be tomatoes that do perfectly fine in the heat of Houston that you know we just haven't trialed here. And there's plenty of books out here. I picked this one just from Greg Grant. He's a horticulturalist, another county extension agent who is excellent. He put this together, and so of course with all these fruits, the tomato is going to have more play time, just because we get more questions about that. Let's see. So, oh, go ahead. Another question. Well, I mean, okay, so the question was, what about those upside down planters? I mean, go for it, whatever you like. I personally do not like them, but that's a personal preference, because you know what grows down, because it's a plant, it'll eventually try to grow up. You know, like if it was like this, some of those are like, you know, then they'll start leaning. But people have had success with them. You know, gardening's all about experimentation. So, you know, what has worked for me might not work for someone else. So I went over all the containers. I don't have anything left. The potting media, fertilizer, support. So the support, what I might put in here is like one of those short round support, and you want to put it in with the planting. Otherwise, you know, you risk damaging some of those roots. Okay. All right, so we are going to go ahead and transition now. I'm going to take a break, and the break means I'm going to fast walk to my office to finish the presentation. I may rinse my hands off real quickly. So in the meantime, if you have tried some kind of container tomatoes that have done really well for you, can you please put in the name and let everyone else see what you've done? The other thing I ask is if you have a tomato joke for me, go ahead and put that in, because I have one when I get back. All right, thanks everyone.
Okay, so as Brandi is transitioning, I'm looking through the questions, and I think Brandi has spoke about most of them. I'm assuming from Lynn, the thoughts on the topsy-turvy tomato planting system. I'm assuming that's the same as the upside down, and Brandi did just touch on that. I have seen some beautiful specimens growing in that. I probably would not recommend for the smaller varieties, because they don't have the canopy in order to fill that entire area. So I would recommend for your larger varieties, more of the first part, more of the larger ones. Let me see here. Let me send this. There was a question by, hold on just a second. Mike, are there any good companion plants, neighboring pots to help with pest control like marigolds? Great question, Mike. And yes, marigolds are great. To me, anything, any annuals or flowers that are producing pollen will bring those beneficial insects in. Remember, if there's not a large pest population, then they need another food source. And so beneficial insects will feed on pollen or nectar because it does supply both. One is carbohydrates, the other one is proteins. And so, yes, anything with pollen is going to be great in order to bring those beneficial insects in, and they'll help to control that pest population if you do have one. All right, let me see. Brandi isn't back yet. I don't see.
I am.
Okay, all right. So I am going to kick it back over to Brandi, and she's going to close out the presentation.
All right. Welcome again. Okay, so the first part of this presentation really is just going to be a review. I'll just leave it on the screen for a minute because, you know, if you weren't taking notes, maybe it'll be a little bit helpful. So we're going to talk about supplies, containers, planting, watering. Just going to touch very briefly on disease resistance and then get into the cultivars. Here is that list that you saw on the board. And the one thing I didn't add was sunlight and water. No, those are not things you have to purchase, but you definitely have to make sure that they are available. Planting minimum of 6 hours, pre-moistened potting soil. I want to review that fertilizer. So you're going to add the slow release, balanced fertilizer, then water in, and then immediately, it's not a week later, it's immediately after that, you're going to use the soluble, and then 1 week from that. So 1 week after planting, you will add your second dose of soluble fertilizer, and you should be good. Let's see. Watering, be sure the growing media is watered thoroughly. One of the problems with tomatoes and disease is just irregular watering. You don't want that soil to get too dried out because there's a whole host of issues that occur with that. And if possible, try to avoid watering the leaves. So just water down at the soil. Pros and cons of containers. Obviously, you know, they're great for small spaces. You know, you have a wide variety of sizes that you can work with. You have control of the medium. That's actually one of the biggest advantages is you don't have as much control in the ground. But if you are growing tomatoes, you absolutely have control of what you grow it in. And I have not been asked the question that I thought I was going to hear. So I'm going to write that down, and if no one asks it, I'm going to bring it up. And then also in containers, you can position where you need or where the sun is. Cons, probably the biggest thing is that initial higher cost, but you know, you don't always have to have a higher cost. You know, if you are going, you know, I showed you a couple low cost options. You will need transplants right now for at least Houston. If you're watching other places, you may have time for seeds, but you know, we finish our growing season, you know, right when the summer heat really hits. And then it will need more water also, because it's relying all on you for its nutrients, its water, and everything. Okay, we are not going to go over a lot of this. This is like a whole nother topic, but tomatoes are always bred for disease resistance. And some of these necessarily, we don't really have to worry too much about. The bottom two, nematodes and the tobacco mosaic virus, you don't really have to worry about those much with containers. But some of the other ones, if you see that they are disease resistant, then that gives you some more comfort. But most of these are funguses, and funguses that have to do with irregular watering. That's why, if your tomato consistently dries out, you're not watering it enough, or it's really in too small of a pot, so it'll produce less, it'll grow maybe shorter, and you may have some issues if it is not disease resistant. Going into, I thought this would help if you saw this list when we were talking about determinate and indeterminate. So determinate tomatoes are essentially referred to as bush tomatoes because they grow shorter, 3 to 4 feet. Indeterminate grow very tall. Those are the ones that need to be staked because they grow so tall. It's not just if a breeze blows by or because the fruit is so heavy. So the support is not necessarily required on most of these, but it is definitely helpful. And along with the difference between the two is that determinate fruit ripens in just a short time frame. Indeterminate will set fruit as long as temperatures are favorable. So here in Houston, when the temperatures start getting really high, it'll stop setting fruit just because, it's too warm. And I want to say that's over like 80 degree, like an 80-degree night is when 75 or 80 degrees, they'll just stop. So this is the fun part, getting into the actual varieties. So Sweet and Neat is a dwarf. It is only 8 to 10 inches tall. What? Oh my gosh. It's so small. When we're looking at maturity, we do want to, the goal should be like around 60 to 75 days. So this is definitely on the low end. So this reaches maturity much more quickly than others. When you're talking about transplants, so how does that affect, how can you kind of tell when the maturity would be? Well, transplants can take 20 to 30 days off of your maturity because, they've already grown and have been stored at the nursery. It is a cherry, but it has really, really strong branches. It has a ton of disease resistance, but this is one of the recommended varieties for Harris County. That does not mean it's not great everywhere else. It's just Harris County around Houston has such incredible heat. So there are certain varieties that have really lived up to being able to survive. And they have been tested by county extension agents here. So when it says Harris County check, that means that it's one of them that has been tested. Doesn't mean that, all the other ones aren't great too. Tiny Tim, this is another dwarf, 15 inches. And also small fruit. I didn't talk about the fruit on the last one, but this is very small, 4 ounces. That equates to about 1 inch long. Maturity is also really low, 60 days. With any of these, but especially Tiny Tim, if you do not have the appropriate light, it will get taller and will produce less. So in ideal conditions, it's right around 15 inches tall. A 5-gallon pot would work for this one. It is smaller, but even a 10-gallon will be even better. When it comes to these containers, you're probably going to have to water every day. This one has really dense foliage, and if you need to, you can actually prune out some of the, this one's not too dense right here, but you can prune out some of those center stems just for a little bit more air circulation. So it's kind of stocky. This one can definitely weigh the plant down with all the fruit. It's kind of sweet tart. Some people say it has an old-fashioned cherry tomato flavor. Super juicy, thin. This would also be a good one for hanging baskets too. But because it's so small, I mean, open up your potential. So if you only have like front steps, it can, you know, with sun, it can grow on front steps, balconies, patios, or maybe even an outdoor centerpiece like on a table. I do have heirloom on here. That was interesting. It is considered heirloom, even though it was developed by, it was bred at, I got it written down somewhere, I think University of New Hampshire. But that was well over 50 years ago. So it is considered, a tomato is considered heirloom if it's open pollinated and over 50 years. Now, when I say that, there's always exceptions. Then there's, you know, there's groups of tomato people that are like, no, it has to be over 60 years. Anyway, we'll just call it an heirloom. All the drama with the tomato genetics. Tumbleweed Tom yellow and red, we have both. I actually have 2 yellow and 2 red to give away, and I may give those away in pairs, like one red, 1 yellow. These are trailing, so even though it says up to 24 inches, that is a little misleading. 24 inches would be like the whole trail. As far as vertical, it may only get, you know, 8 to 10 inches tall, maybe 12 inches. But most of that length is going to be trailing. So that's why you will see these in hanging baskets a lot. No staking is really necessary here. That fruit is a little bit bigger, 1 to 2 ounces. So still about 1 inch fruit. And maturity 65 days. And this is also one that was tested here in Harris County for the heat. But if you're watching elsewhere, I'm sure it's done very well all around the county. Patio Choice is an option I got from one fellow agent, and this is a bush. So when you look over here at the top, it says trailing, and this one says bush. They're all determinate tomatoes. This is just to kind of give you an idea of how tall they are. And I've worked from the smallest, and I'm going to the tallest. So Patio Choice is a cherry, 15 to 18 inches tall. Again, it can get taller if not in the right conditions. That fruit size is pretty small, 1/2 inch. Super small, but each plant has been reported to produce like around 100 tomatoes on each plant. So pretty impressive. They are a bit sweet with just a touch of acid. This is AAS is All-American Selection. So this has been this is an All-American selection for producing and growing very well around the country. Paul, are there any questions?
Yes, there are. Here is one from Steve. He wants to know, what ratio would you recommend with regard to garden soil, perlite, vermiculite, peat moss, if you are to mix your own?
It's usually like even, so like a 1-1-1. You just don't want to use too much peat moss, because if you do, then when you're watering and over time, it can really compress. But yeah, about an even mixture.
Okay. Cindy had a question of, why do tomatoes split at the top?
It's usually I believe it's usually from inconsistent watering, but you know, some of it is just genetically in the, you know, some are genetically inclined to do that, or they have been bred to not do that. Do you have any input on that, Paul?
It's usually a moisture issue. They either go from too wet to too dry to too wet, or we get in an extremely wet situation that soil doesn't get a chance to dry out, and there's not enough oxygen, and you can run into some issues that way. But if you're maintaining consistent moisture, your fruit should be fine.
All roads lead to that watering and
Yeah,
root health.
and we've got one more here from Steve. He wants to know, are there any indeterminate slicing, not cherry tomatoes, that are more heat tolerant and produced during the summer?
Well, actually, Paul, I don't know if you attached it yet, but posted it, but we have that vegetable varieties for Harris County, at least that have been tested. And that has mostly indeterminate on it. That and again, I'll just say that doesn't mean that those are the only tomatoes that will do well in high heat. Those are the tomatoes that have done really well here that have been tested. And if it has an asterisk beside it, it's mainly that it did very, very, very well.
Okay, yes, that has been posted. So, you know, he can click on that link and download it. And just so everybody knows, because we did get a question, I will when you receive your email with the survey and the link to this recording, I'll attach the links for these resources. So you can turn around and have them as a resource that way.
Yeah, and I think some of them, not all of them, but some of them I actually included on the latest issue of our homegrown newsletter. So if you just want to be able to go and click one click, they are there. All right, so this is just another, this was a Skip's picture, but this one's an All-American. So it's the yellow. This one's yellow though. This is the one that is an All-American selection. All right, Bush Early Girl. So now we're getting out of the cherry tomatoes. It really grows more like a smaller bush. When I say standard, more like a slicer tomato. Still not too tall. Bush Early Girl is 18 to 24 inches. So this is a relative of Early Girl, but the tomatoes are a little bit bigger. And you actually get more tomatoes on this one than other typical container plants. An estimate about 100 tomatoes per plant. We were just talking about cherry tomatoes, 100. This is look at the size of those. That's 100. So yeah, there's definitely more poundage there. These are you can see they're a bit bigger, about 4 inches across, 6 to 7 ounce fruit. Maturity is still within our goal, 65 days. You can see it has a lot of disease resistance. You know, those initials were displayed earlier, and it just produces a lot of tomatoes. It's a really strong bush, and this one did produce very well in around Houston. So patio tomatoes. These are it's a bush. Well, it says, I don't think I should have standard on there. It's more like, even though they're about 4 ounces, so they're about two inches, but they're more, you know, they're smaller, more like cherry tomatoes, just a little bit bigger. The plant will grow to 24 inches tall, but it's very compact. It can get a little wide, so that's another reason to consider your containers. You don't necessarily want a really narrow pot for some of these plants because you want to be able to give them that horizontal support to provide and support a little bit wider of a plant. Does it have to be staked? Not necessarily, but you know, it does have a heavy fruit load, so you know, it's all the better. It produces all its fruits in about 8 weeks. A master gardener, I got a feedback from her, and her opinion was, you know, it's a really sturdy bush. It has really great yield. She just was not sold on the flavor. You know, not the best flavor, but it's been around for a long time. It's a great producer. So, you know, I think it makes it probably a good contender for sauces and, you know, cooking, maybe just not out of hand. And you can grow these in hanging baskets also. BHN 968. This is another bush cherry tomato, has broad resistance. It was tested in Harris County, 2 to 4 feet, so we're getting a little bit taller, less than 1 ounce, so still a really small fruit. That maturity is 60 days. That's great. It's sweeter than other cherry tomatoes, and it's said to have better flavor and even texture than other cherry tomatoes. But do be aware that it does not set seed. It is sterile. So you're not going to get anything, another offspring from it. Now, when we talk about availability, I did mention a few that I saw at the nurseries. Some of these may just be for seed. So if you want to grow them, it could be something you do, you know, for the fall, at least here in Houston, or next year if you're elsewhere. But I have found, I want to say I found about 5 of these at the nurseries already, but you know, it's still pretty early. We had a lot of cold. So this is one that I have not seen physically in the stores. But just to say, as an emphasis on how well it does, it was also named a Texas Superstar, which, you know, those are the plants that do best under such a wide variety of conditions across Texas. Getting towards the end, this plant is not in a container, but you can see the side or the size. So Bush Champion 2. Champion is on that Harris County list. Bush Champion 2 isn't, just because we haven't trialed it. The difference is that the champions are indeterminate. This Bush Champion is determinate. So it's going to grow a little bit taller, 30 to 36 inches, but it's still not going to grow as tall as some of the other ones. It has really big, large, meaty tomatoes. And you can see that staking it is probably going to help that one out. Now, this is the last one for, I have like one bonus one next, but this is the last one in this list, Celebrity. So this is, again, a taller bush, but it's 3 to 4 feet. It is semi-determinate. That would explain getting quite a, you know, little bit of height on it. It has been tested in Harris County. Look at that. Actually, this one has all 3. Tested in Harris County, did great. It is a Texas Superstar. And it is also an all-American selection. So overall, it's a really great tomato. It does ripen fruit over a little bit longer of a time, but again, with the heat, it's going to depend on our temperatures. You definitely don't want to do this in a 5-gallon pot. You know, these last 2, you want to aim more. Could you get away with 10? Possibly. You want to aim more for a 15-gallon. Again, if you can grow, you could probably grow anything in any size of pot, right? It's just how well is it going to grow. So the more soil that you have to hold moisture for those roots, the better that tomato is going to be, the tomato plant. So this one is just tried and true, really great yield, and it does, it is crack resistant also. So this next one is not even a determinant, but I thought it was really cool, and it's a brand new 2022 All-American Selection Vegetable winner. Look how cool that is. I mean, that like magenta with the green stripes, but I like when it's cut, it still has that like bright red, just a beautiful contrast. Disease resistant. So, you know, this kind of, you know, goes into what can I actually grow in a container. Yes, you could probably grow indeterminate varieties in containers if it's large enough, you have the support. So, you know, don't let this list, you know, limit what you do. What's really misleading about this picture is it kind of looks like a cherry, but they say the size is like a pool ball. It was just really funny. I thought it was really funny. It doesn't come across that big. All right, so this is a little bit of a summary. I like to try to make sense of everything. So for me, I put it, how do I make sense of the plant size and the fruit size? So I have Tumbling Tom out to the side because, you know, I already explained that. It's more in the trailing. Depends how technical you want to get. But it goes from the smallest to the largest, how tall they grow. And then the fruit size, you can see that it doesn't go in the same order. You have that BHN, which can grow taller, but it's one of the smaller tomatoes. Patio Choice is also up there. And then the Sweet Meat, it's a small plant with small, small fruits. So that's just a little bit of reference to give you an idea, depending on if you want to make your decisions based on plant size or fruit size. As far as disease and pests, look under those leaves, check when you purchase them, check while you're growing them, try to, you know, a steady stream of water can do a whole lot. That would be the time, I said not to water the leaves, that would be the time that you do, you know, that it's okay. Remove yellow leaves, wash off any of those insects, which I don't know how to spell, insects. Am I the only one laughing? And no beneficials and pests. Cultural practices, I do want to mention blossom end rot. This is basically a deficiency caused, or a deficiency of calcium at that blossom end. And why does it have a deficiency of calcium? Can anyone guess? It's drought stress. I didn't give you time to type it in. Drought stress, so watering. So maintain uniform moisture, soil moisture, mulch, plant with good drainage, make sure that pot has drainage, plant in a big enough pot, and then remove any damaged fruit as soon as you see it. And don't let it hang, don't let it drop. And then harvesting, there we go. So the front picture, the front tomato, like in the center, you know, that's so super green. That is not, you know, that's definitely not ripe. But when it starts getting a blush, technically you can start harvesting it. If you have problems with pests, squirrels, birds, you can harvest it when it starts getting a little bit more of a blush, and then just let it continue inside. Some of these, I mean, they will taste better if if they're able to be left on the vine until they're nice and red or yellow. I thought this image was interesting because it has an apple in there. That's not a tomato. For me, this is just a reminder. I don't know if you store all your fruits and vegetables in the same area, but I always keep my apples away from everything because they emit like an ethylene gas, and they'll just ripen things sooner. So it depends if you want them ripened. But there are some theories that the apple, like a banana, would be better if you're trying to get tomatoes ripened quicker. That the gas that comes off a banana would do it a little bit, just a little bit better for the tomato in the taste. I will end this also before I take questions by saying that I definitely am not a store of tomatoes in the refrigerator. Everyone has their preference, but I store all my tomatoes on the counter. It's probably one of the biggest little tiny arguments I'll have with my husband. He likes them to be chilled off. Well, you know, I think it just changes the texture of it. It could, because it does. If you need the argument, Brandi said it does. Yeah, so I will put them in the fridge if they're going to be cooked, definitely. Then these are just some different, just different ways you can grow tomatoes in containers. I like this bottom left-hand one. It has a really nice city view. Summary. So sunlight and water, and choose the best variety for you. So hopefully, you know, this will help you out a little bit. We can't possibly go over all of them, but hopefully it'll give you a little bit of an idea, better idea. Container choice is very important. Drainage, consistent moisture, and just have fun. And these are the resources. So this very last one, I have to tell you, I found this recently. It's through, I think, another Hood County in here in Texas. I thought it was pretty hilarious. It was 115 ways to prepare tomato for the table. I mean, they had all your traditional, then they had tomato fritters, tomato relish, tomato fluff. Look that one up, tomato fluff. So if you want to find some new ways to consume your tomatoes while being entertained, check out that link. All right, Paul, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. It is your lucky day.
Uh-oh.
All right. So from Angie, she's got a question. I bought some Campari tomatoes, and after a while, a couple ended up with sprouting seeds inside. Would those seeds be viable to plant?
I can't say that I would know that answer. I mean, if they've sprouted, here's what I would say. I mean, try it. I mean, obviously it's not a sterile seed. So, I mean, but I can't, I always find it an oddity when, you know, when tomatoes start doing that. To me, I'm like, yeah, that's weird. I'm not gonna do that. So, I mean, and professional answer, I can't really tell you.
Well, actually, it's a physiological response. It's called vivipary, and it occurs. Yeah, there's your Jeopardy question for the answer for the day. But it occurs when the fruit is overripe. So obviously the tomatoes weren't picked on time. Can you plant them? Probably, but they're not going to. If that was an F1 variety, which has a specific male and female parent, the seed is not going to be true to type. So yeah, you could probably plant them, but it's probably not going to be the same plant or the same type of tomato that it came from.
Oh, awesome.
So
was it vivipary?
Vivipary, Vivpary.
Oh, nice.
Let's see. I do have a couple more questions for you. Oh, here is the joke. We've only gotten one joke.
Okay.
But I like this one. This is from Alicia. A cabbage, tomato, and nose were racing against each other. The cabbage was ahead, the nose was running, and the tomato was trying to catch up.
Ba-dum-bum. Hey, wait, mine is this. What do you do with unproductive tomato employees?
I don't know. What do you do with unproductive tomato employees?
You can them. That was a fellow coworker that told me that.
I'm slapping my knee over here.
Well, I think that's mean.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a knee slapper. So, okay. Let's get back to a few more questions here. Sori asks, would you recommend adding dolomite or azomite to the soil at planting time?
I'm not familiar with that. Are you, Paul?
Well, dolomite is usually dolomitic has to do with lime. Dolomitic lime has magnesium in it. So and azomite is predominantly micronutrients. So unless you have done a soil sample and you know what, if you're missing any of it, you know, I don't think it will hurt. But it could, especially if it's dolomitic lime, it could affect the pH of the soil. Even though we're on the low pH side here anyway, we're below 7. So I think and I would recommend reading the bag. I have not used any of those products with tomatoes. So I would check with the manufacturer, check their website, and see what they recommend.
Okay, before we go on to other questions, I do want to mention that I'm going to give away some of these tomato plants. The one I potted up, the 2 small yellow tumbling toms, the 2 red tumbling toms, and I think there was another bush early girl that I can pot up in one of those pots. So we will do probably a couple giveaways. I will pull one name Monday, and then I'll wait another week in case people have watched it another way. So if you're here today and you get the survey, then go ahead and fill out the option that says you would like to be a part of that. Now, of course, you can only do that if you're here in Harris County and you come pick it up at the extension. We are located off of 290 between Sam Houston and 610. So yeah, and then I'll put some tomato resources together too, like that vegetable container publication that you saw. And so yeah, for fun. Okay, so Paul, what other questions?
Okay, so actually, someone made a comment, and this makes a lot of sense. Is you made the comment about the apple, and they said the apple gives you an idea of the size of the tomatoes, so it's there for reference. So
yes.
All right, so Steve's got a question with regard to any data or experience on adding aspirin or Epsom salts to tomato plants.
Well, I mean, we're here at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. I'm not aware of any kind of research-based studies that talk about that. Have I missed something there, Paul?
So I have not seen anything with regard to aspirin. I'm assuming the salicylic acid in there may have an influence, but I am not aware of that. But with regard to Epsom salts, that's magnesium sulfate. And so if there is intraveinochlorosis, or if magnesium is sometimes tied in with the blossom end rot, so you could put that down. I would do it as a liquid application, and I'm sure it's you can find what the recommendation, the concentration should be. But yes, you can use Epsom salts because of the magnesium in it, if that's what it needs. We used to use it a lot when we grew our mums, when we would get some intraveinochlorosis. So.
And thank you, Paul. You have some expertise on that, so thank you for being able to help out there.
Sure. We got another one here from Larry. I find slicers ripen on the counter well after blush. Cherry tomatoes do not seem to ripen as well. Any varieties which ripen better?
Well, all of those that I covered, if you look up information about them, they will all say that they're just a lot better to ripen on the vine. So, you know, I think when there's an emergency, like, you know, predators, or, you know, if it's in the fall and there's cold temperatures coming, you know, to do what you have to. But no, I have not seen any that, I haven't read anything that, read any recommendations. They all generally say to leave them on the vine as long as possible.
Okay, we've got another joke. All right. Charisse, what did the lemon in the salad say to the tomato?
Lemon in the salad say to the tomato. Oh gosh, it has something to do with dressing. What is it?
Give me a squeeze.
Oh no.
Okay. Let me see. We are winding down here. Let's end it with this. This has been asked several times. Can you please say which 1 to 3 varieties are easiest to grow for beginners?
Well, I think any of them that I covered really are going to be pretty easy. I mean, you know, the easy part comes in, you know, when you're making the right choices with the pot, having a big enough pot, not letting it dry out. And if it is consistently drying out, the next year, you know that you have to pot it up. But, you know, like that Bush Champion, you know, that's going to grow a little bit taller. That Celebrity is going to grow a little bit taller. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but, you know, if you just don't want to, you know, if you don't have the space, or you don't want to deal with, you know, having to, manage a taller plant. But I mean, some of those are so small that, if you put that short round support in there, you're just doing it for the tomatoes. But all it comes down to, you do all the right steps. You just be sure that it stays properly wet. You look for insects, and I think they're all gonna, they're all gonna be pretty easy to start out with.
Okay. Actually, we have a few more, and then we'll close it out. And I've got a joke here that we'll close it out with. So, are there any dwarf plants that produce larger size tomatoes?
Yeah, the ones that I call dwarf, those were all cherries. But going back, they're all running together right now in my head. I think that Bush Early Girl, it's not a dwarf, but when people talk about patio tomatoes, determinate tomatoes, they sometimes say dwarf. I just separated those just so that way you as viewers can kind of tell a difference between the sizes. But that Bush Early Girl, I mean, it's 18 to 24 inches. I mean, that's pretty short. And that's got those 4-inch tomatoes. So I would say Bush Early Girl. I mean, it's not going to be tiny dwarf, but I mean, you look at that one plant was 8 to 10 inches. Ugh, that would be weird.
Yeah.
I guess we would buy it
right.
though, but that would
genetically it can't handle it.
Yeah.
Because it's not big enough. All right. One more serious question and then the joke. All right. So they asked, how about eggshells soaked in vinegar for blossom end rot? Have you ever come across that at all? I have not heard of that. I haven't seen it. So
I have not, and that's the thing, is that there are a lot of home remedies, and some things work for other people, but as far as at AgriLife Extension, there is an Aggie Hort link, and do I have it on here? Tomato Problem Solver. If you go there, it'll give you some options for all the different issues that, and I don't know if that one is on there. I would imagine it is, but as far as our viewpoint, there's just a lot of home remedies, and we can't necessarily stand behind them unless we've researched them.
Okay, here's our joke, and
okay,
then we will close out. What did Arnold Schwarzenegger say to his tomato seeds after watering them for the first time?
Okay, I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna get in character here. You've been germinated.
That works so much better with the accent too. Okay, that one we might have to remember. Thank you.
All righty. Well, folks, thank you for joining us today. We hope that this information was helpful. We do appreciate your support of the program. You will be receiving an email later today with the survey, with the link to the recording, and I will also add these resource links in there. So without any further ado, I just want to thank you all. Brandi, great job. And it is good to be here and to provide the information for you folks.
Bye.